What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Cameron Parker, Gage and Cam, and the OG, Glenn Hauser. What's up, everybody? How are we doing?
Doing well. I guess you could say, we're getting fully healthy, right? Like a bunch of the other people, that coming out of Broncos camp, we're getting fully healthy. We're getting fully restored now that the Broncos, are getting full swing, if you will, in preseason.
Absolutely.
Dan thought I would beat Avatar. Ty, you'll never beat Avatar. Avatar's always the first one in. Doesn't matter. Once again, welcome to the show. If you haven't heard the news, we've been sharing it for 2 weeks now, but we are having a brand new show starting tomorrow on the PSF app. Make sure you download it. It's a show called Elevation Orange, and we're going to be doing, especially tomorrow's show is going to be more of like a review, like preview, kind of looking at the last couple games that we've had for the preseason, and looking at the Rams game that's coming up this weekend, and just kind of going over Broncos stuff, kind of like we do here, but on somewhere else. Yeah, like that.
Exactly.
So a little bit of sad news. Mike Shanahan does not make it into the Hall of Fame.
Boo-er.
Makes no sense to me.
No. Not to go so much into our soapbox, but I mean, because we spent so much time talking about why he does, belong into the Hall of Fame. It's one of those things again. It's just, I just don't know what else he can do, to get in. And that's not a slam at, Buddy, was it Buddy Parker, who went in from the Lions. So, I mean, yeah, it's not, by any means, it's not disparaging it. It's just one of those things. Like, and especially considering like he also won back-to-back Super Bowls, so I'm not trying to hate on that, but I don't know what more you can ask for with Mike Shanahan, especially everything we've been hearing, from both, Albert Breer and especially Mike Kliss, that you were starting to kind of get, something along the lines that maybe something was going to happen, but it's frustrating. And I will say Nick Ferguson has a gut. I know he mentioned it on Twitter, but maybe he's kind of like got that gut feeling that maybe because Mike Shanahan didn't get in, that's reason for optimism that Randy Gradishar may be getting in.
But why can't both get in on the same year? Okay. So again,
I don't know.
I don't take anything away from anybody that made the Hall of Fame, but I don't even know who this Lions coach is.
I didn't either. I had to look him up. I'm sorry. No offense to him, but that's well before my time of education of the NFL.
Yeah,
if the guy wasn't coaching when Bronco Bill was alive, like, are you freaking kidding me?
He's too old.
God, seriously.
His name's Buddy Parker, dude. No, all kidding aside, but what's annoying is the Broncos didn't have a Hall of Famer until John Elway. Elway retired, so when did he go in? 2004? So that was 44 years after the team came into existence, and that was our first Hall of Famer. Granted, they have caught up to some of these guys. However, we still have some dudes missing. I'm hoping we add one to the mix tomorrow. But I mean, it makes zero sense. And when you look it up, KB, hey Ken, good to see you. Mentions Dick Vermeil, and exactly. Where's the consistency? Where are the championships? Where's the coaching tree? Yeah.
It just feels like he punished for Washington. That's what it almost feels like. Is that really that big of a blemish on his record? I don't think it is.
Right.
Well,
he didn't like Daniel Snyder.
And also for perspective, and granted this was a player, but didn't Tony Baselli go in with the Jaguars, and that was the first ever Jacksonville Jaguars player, and they were even started much later than the Broncos. I mean, so I mean, as far as the franchise goes, it's super frustrating, and I went on my soapbox numerous times, but it's frustrating that we can't get any representation of the Orange Crush defense in the Hall of Fame. And, it's frustrating that, you can't even get any sort of recognition of Mike Shanahan in the Hall of Fame, knowing the fact that Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur all come from that Shanahan type tree, if you will. And so it's so frustrating, this, and especially from the back-to-back, and I don't know what the strong case was for Buddy Parker, because obviously we weren't that fly in the room, but I don't know what more you could have said that's a stronger argument to put Mike Shanahan in over Parker.
Right. How did he get the momentum all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Whoever presented Buddy did a phenomenal job.
They did.
Yeah.
We'll see about tomorrow. The vote happened today for the 3 senior players that are 3 out of 12 are going to be, moving on towards the real vote during Super Bowl week. And we'll find out tomorrow about Randy. I mean, all of us were talking earlier that, we're surprised that there's not even any sort of whispers or any, sort of nuggets about, how the vote went today. So I don't know if that's a good thing, a bad thing, or completely indifferent.
Well, and looking at the list of candidates for the Hall of Fame, I don't think there's anyone on that list right now for this class that has a better resume than Randy Gradishar. So I don't see how he doesn't get it. But we've been saying that for years. So
right, we said that was.
Can we just get new voters,
please? I mean, Adam Schefter called that out on 104.3 The Fan, I believe. He was just livid about this, that it boils down to however many voters is, I'm not exactly sure. But the fact that, Bill Cowher. Yeah.
And that's nothing against Cowher, because I love Cowher.
No, not at all.
Yeah. It's just, he was in.
Cordell!
He was
Cordell!
in far too
I know
early.
you can hear me.
And the thing that's sad on that, and this is, I think, the reality of guys like a Bill Cowher, right? Bill Cowher, is there's also that media presence, right, with Cowher. And so he did the shows with, NFL Today and the NFL pregame show. And so it's I felt like that amount of exposure only just reinforces that much. And to TD's credit, I would say that played a huge role, because I think he was on NFL Network, if I'm not mistaken, around that point. And Kurt Warner's the same case. Kurt Warner was the same case. I do think both were certainly qualified for the Hall of Fame, but I think being a part of the media played a large role with Cowher.
I mean, if you remember, he actually was told he was going into the Hall of Fame on the show. David Baker showed up on the set when they were live, and he was told in front of his colleagues. So
that's cool. Yeah, but
that wasn't awesome.
That was cool, but KB with a good point. Gradishar with 2,000 tackles, and that's one of the points that seems to be a hang up for a lot of these voters, saying that they don't think that the tackle records are accurate. And so I say, all right, well, take 40% of the tackles play. There you got, then he'd have 1,200 tackles in 10 years. It just take away anything if you don't think that. And it's still light years above a lot of these guys that, have made it. Let me just make this other point. Merlin Olsen's brother, Phil Olsen, said that one of the things that's hurt Randy is that he really didn't want to push have these funded campaigns, for him he wanted to earn it on his own. And I think that's, that's one of the things that has hurt him, is that, just as we were saying with the coaches, is that he hasn't really pushed his candidacy himself, kind of like how Drew Pearson got in a couple of years ago.
And I was just going to say, I think the hope is that, say Gradishar gets in, and being a member of the Orange Crush defense, that opens the door and the floodgates for some of those other players and members of the Orange Crush, Carl Mecklenburg, being another one, so open the door for possibly Mecklenburg getting in.
Louis Wright.
Isn't
Dennis
that kind of
Smith.
the problem, though? Why do these guys have to campaign in the media to get in. Like, isn't that the problem? Like, if you look at Randy Gradishar's resume, why does he have to campaign to get in? It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you're a voter and you have to be reminded of how good he is, please step down and let somebody else vote.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. I don't get it.
His highlight reel is amazing, and when you think about the run stuffing that he was responsible for, and he revolutionized the goal line stand. He was the middle linebacker, and he would go straight and actually launch himself, similar to how Walter Payton would launch himself on the offensive side. Gradishar would do the same thing and just stuff these guys more often than not. I mean, just pure legend. So fingers crossed we get some good news tomorrow, and we can talk about it on tomorrow night's show.
Yeah. One of the other big news stories that broke today, Jonathan Taylor has been granted permission to seek a trade from the Colts. I do not think the Broncos will get him, but I'm hearing a lot of rumors about the Chiefs, and I don't like that at all.
Yeah, I tell you, how dumb is Jim Irsay? Like, you publicly, basically blast your running back, and then two, it's also been rather, notorious in terms of not helping out your rookie quarterback. This sounds awfully familiar to Andrew Luck, and we've had this conversation before, but it's just like, what more, do you have to do to show and gain that comfortability for your young quarterback with Anthony Richardson? And oh, by the way, as a quarterback, aside from the tight end, the best thing that makes a quarterback your best friend is a running game.
Especially when you have a mobile quarterback. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, especially when you have a mobile quarterback in Anthony Richardson where you're running read option and all that kind of stuff. I mean, having a dynamic running back with Jonathan Taylor, that only makes that even more of a threat. I apologize for interrupting.
It's Glenn's rap song in the background. That's what that
is. His album's dropping soon.
Glenn and them. Yeah.
Glenn and them.
The album cover, for anybody that don't know, is him, with the, impersonating George Costanza. Of course, on the what is it, the sofa? Yeah. So that's
the sofa.
Oh yeah, the Christmas photo.
Yeah.
It's not impersonating the baby on the Nirvana album, but anyway.
No, let's not do that.
God,
let's not do that.
Let's not go there, please.
No. But who do you guys think would be the favorite landing spot for Jonathan Taylor? Philly.
Funny enough.
Why would you do this to your best player? Yeah. Who's not a pain in the ass? Like, right. The guy, I don't understand it. And you belittle him publicly. What message does that send to any of the other guys?
Yep.
And what message does that send to the quarterback that you were just talking about? All the more reason to So one of the things that Pro Football Talk was talking about, their radio show, was saying, what happens if, as he's negotiating with these other teams and he tells them what he's willing to take, the Colts goes, Florio's like, what if they said, we thought you wanted 16 million. If you're taking 12, all right, we're going to keep you and pay you 12. So all of a sudden the guy's stuck in a place where he doesn't really want to be, and rightfully so. I mean, we're not going to feel sorry for him with that kind of paycheck, but still it's just an odd situation. That's somebody you build around and not, send packing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the rare thing with Jonathan Taylor is, like, there was that case with Derrick Henry a little bit, but in terms of this whole conversation about the running back market, the one running back I would say right now that could possibly change that entire, course of action and debate would probably be Jonathan Taylor. And so if you want to change that entire narrative, Jim Irsay, or if you guys have been listening to Mainly Broncos, Germ Irsay,
love it,
but I mean, if you want to rewrite that narrative, pay him what he's worth. He is your best offensive player. Pay him the 15-20 million a year in order for you to reset the market for that running back, because he is your best offensive player, and so you should be rewarding him as such, not publicly, as you said, humiliating him in the media.
And this is just Germ Irsay, man. This is just another blemish on his record. I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. That's beautiful. But this man is so incompetent. I feel like now that Dan Snyder is gone, he's in contention for worst owner in the NFL right now. He really is.
Between he and Arizona.
Yep, I agree wholeheartly. Because
I kind of want to have that conversation.
Well, then remember he's gonna pay like $8 million or something crazy to transfer a killer whale across country. But he won't pay Jonathan Taylor. I mean, the guy's buying Jack Nicklaus's putter from the Masters, but
he can pay Free Willy, but he can't pay Jonathan Taylor.
Let's see. Where do I begin with this dude? Alienated Peyton Manning out of the building to draft Andrew Luck, and then completely fails to put a supporting cast around Andrew Luck until his body is already broken down by 2018. And entering that 2019 season mentally, Andrew Luck was no longer checked into the game, and understandably so. This dude is clearly a guy who has other interests outside of football. He loves football, but he loves other things in his life as well. That was very clear. And then Jim Irsay has been a direct reason why the Colts quarterback situation has been so dog shit ever since Andrew Luck has been there. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, 2019. 2020, Phillip Rivers, who actually played pretty well for them for the most part, led them to a playoff game and was one of the reasons why they were in that playoff game pretty much until the fourth quarter against the Bills. He actually kind of lobbied to alienate Phillip Rivers out and pushed him into basically an early retirement into his head coaching gig because he wanted Carson Wentz to reunite Carson Wentz with Frank Reich. That was a Jim Irsay and a Frank Reich move. And ultimately, Jim Irsay ended up getting pissed off with Carson Wentz by the end of the season and alienated him out the door. And
Frank Reich
started to go on last season. And Frank Reich, too.
Yeah.
Remember the Irsay video of him standing in front of the private jet basically apologizing for the Carson Wentz signing?
Yeah. And he caused it. He literally caused it.
Yeah. Which is why I was going to say, that's why we said earlier, just how bad it is. Like, how bad it is of how this whole situation is.
We should call him Jim Beam instead of Jim Irsay.
Jim Beam. Germ Beam.
That's
a little. No, like the team that makes the most sense to me, just trade value wise and being able to pay the contract with new owners is the Commanders. Like that kind of makes sense. Like you're looking to have like that franchise player. He's a franchise player, and then you add in is it Sam Howell? Is he the one started with the Commanders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Would they do a handshake deal on that?
I mean,
you obviously didn't see the clip from last night.
I did not. What clip?
Joe Buck was talking.
Oh yeah,
Commanders owner
shook his pinky.
The joke is much better if it doesn't have to be explained.
Troy Aikman was like trying not to laugh.
Right.
Yeah, he lost it.
But I mean, they have Brian Robinson in the backfield. They have Antonio Gibson in the backfield, so they don't necessarily need a Jonathan Taylor. But but I will say with
not even close.
But with Eric Bieniemy there, who is a former running back and offensive coordinator down there in Washington, I wouldn't rule it out. I think the team that. Now, I know that it's funny enough we're going to be doing joint practices with them this week, but I think that a team that I think as far as like, and given their landscape, it's, I think, changed a little bit, but they have definitely shown the propensity of just basically throwing all their chips in and just saying, let's go do this. And I would not be surprised if maybe the Rams are a team, that could possibly, dangle the Jonathan Taylor idea. I like the Eagles idea though. I know they traded for DeAndre Swift, which funny enough, he showed up at the Eagles joint practice, like with the Colts, like day after he requested or they gave him the ability to seek a trade. So,
but you know what, Cam, like you mentioned the Rams, if you remember, like Sean McVay is credited as being the guy that has killed the running back market.
Yeah.
And he is actually quoted as saying that he's never going to pay a running back big money after the Todd Gurley deal. So that would be very interesting. We'll see.
What about Buffalo?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's somebody who I feel like is pretty much a run game away, or a non-Josh Allen run game, I should say, away from actually being heavy contenders.
Jerry
I like
Jones
how we're
being
pushing
screen enough to do that.
I do like how we're pushing the like him to go to the NFC more than
Well,
Yeah,
and I will.
anything.
Well, and it's, I know the Chiefs were mentioned, but I hate to do this, but
Stop. Stop.
but I will say that as far as an AFC team that would scare me
I'm gonna mute you.
if it was Jonathan Taylor, it would be the Chargers. Austin Eckler, you know, who knows what's going to happen with him. You have Jonathan Taylor you could possibly, you know, trade with. You know, you get a running game with Herbert and Taylor, maybe Eckler, you know, depending on what they could do contract-wise. I mean,
can't you see the Raiders trading for Taylor and then
that would be
from Jacobs to
hilarious.
just screw him over? Yeah.
It'd be
Who, by
on
the way-
brand with them too.
who, by the way, is ending his holdout for AFC West news. He's ending his holdout.
Yay.
Yeah, he should have ended it a while ago.
Yeah. So let's go into some Broncos news. The Broncos are adding a wide receiver, Josh Hammond from the XFL, because of the Jalen Virgil injury, which we just found out today. Ends up he's going to be going on injured reserve. He's going to lose the season, which sucks. And I like you argue if you want, but that was a touchdown. I don't care what you say. That was a touchdown.
Not just that, but I mean, they didn't have any timeouts, and with the fact he was injured, they should have at least been warranted an injury timeout. Like, and so like the clock should have stopped. There was even if there wasn't an injury timeout, there was 1 second left on the clock.
There
was like, it gave me flashbacks to the Big 12 championship against Nebraska and Texas. There was 1 second on the clock. Okay.
Yeah.
There was 1 second on the clock. But I mean, that also at the end, and this was kudos. I don't know if you guys, Glenn or Mike, I don't know if you guys got the chance to see the local coverage here, but Ryan Harris and Steve Levy made a really good point of emphasis of saying how much that would matter to the coaching staff of keeping Virgil on, because, you know, hurting his meniscus and then lining up as soon as, you know, and making sure he was lining up was a big thing to show the heart and character of that particular player, that he wants to make that 53-man roster, knowing the situation of everything that he was in. So it's just it was a to quote the title of a movie, it was a series of unfortunate events.
When did he hurt it though? Was it during the play or was it after he popped up?
I think it was when he was pulling away to get into the end zone. I think that's what happened.
Okay.
But when did they review it? It doesn't look. They couldn't have possibly taken any time to look at that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it didn't seem like they really took any time to look at it.
Yeah.
You would have thought automatic review on that, but
Which was ridiculous.
I think they did. Did they review it?
I don't know. I don't even know.
no, because they ran up to the line and they attempted to spike the ball. There was no lapse in time.
That's right.
That's right.
And even if there was a injury timeout, at that point they probably would have reviewed it. But also by that same token, it was a scoring play. All scoring plays are reviewable. So you should be able to review that play.
Yep, and it's inside 2 minutes, so there's nothing that Sean could have done about it.
True. So going into other injury news and then going right into reviewing the 49ers game, Mike McGlinchey, it seems like he's back in practice. He's going to be good to go. So instead of seeing Isaiah Prince out there, we're going to be seeing Mike McGlinchey. And that kind of leads me into the first topic about the 49ers game. I was more impressed with the offensive line play. They played better. I'm not going to say it was great. They played better. I'm still concerned about Ben Powers. Well, he seems to be getting run over or around often.
Yeah, you shouldn't see the number 74 as regularly as we do. You know, he's getting spun around quite a bit. Quinn Miners, on the other hand, looked really, really good the other night.
Yeah, well, and especially with the amount of money that we're paying McGlinchey and Powers, he shouldn't be getting. And we don't even know, because McGlinchey was having a hard time at training camp, at least from what I'm being told. And now we've got Powers who's struggling in the games. Like, are we really paying that much money for 2 offensive linemen that aren't better than last year's?
Yeah.
I mean, though I feel like Powers was poor, I feel like he did show some signs of improvement from the Arizona game to the San Francisco game. I don't think it was a complete disaster for Powers, but seeing that from him is still concerning to me because he was one of the more consistent linemen on that unit in camp, him and Cushenberry, really. And I'd throw Miners in there too, but that interior was really the most consistent part of that unit. And Powers, I mean, he did play better against San Francisco, but it was not by any means good.
Right.
Yeah. And, I was actually kind of looking at it from the Pro Football Focus, like, grade perspective. If you look at it, like, his preseasons have honestly not been that great. If you actually look at his grades, his best grade I felt like in preseason was probably maybe like 2019 or something like that, or 2020, like his best preseason grade. So this isn't surprising, by any means in terms of what we see from a Pro Football Focus grade perspective, but from the run blocking side of things, which is a strong suit for him, you saw the positive signs with that paired with Quinn Miners. The pass blocking is still a little bit of an issue. The only thing that I would say, and I'm not an offensive line aficionado, I'm not like the Brandon Thorns of the world or anything like that, but I wonder, and I don't know this answer, but we know sometimes during preseason or during training camp, sometimes they want to work on a certain technique, right? And I wonder if maybe Ben Powers is working on a certain pass blocking technique or blocking technique during preseason, and that's why we're seeing a lot of some of the blow-bys, if you will, from some of the members of the defensive line. So that's the only thing that I can think of, is maybe he's just working on some sort of technique, and that's why you're seeing a lot of pressures and some sacks.
It's a turnstile attack.
I like that theory.
Or what's it like in basketball? It's like giving them the chair where you just you're defending them and then you just let them
the top.
Yeah.
No,
I
think he's going to get it together. I have high hopes for Ben.
Me too.
High hopes. But looking at some of the positives from the game, Russell Wilson, he looks quick. He was running all over the place. Ball was accurate. Placement was accurate. It was fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah, he looked phenomenal. I mean, there was a point where he was running the football, and I know myself was actually thinking, it's like, are we sure he lost 15 pounds and not more? Because like he moved really quick, and I think that was also a sign of, because there was so much speculation going into that preseason game about whether or not Russell Wilson, or just starters in general, were going to be playing more than one series. But here's the sign of how big it was that Russell Wilson played so well. He played so well that after one series, and that one lone series that we saw, Sean Payton was like, dude, all right, I'm good. And pulled the plug on Russ for the rest of the game. It was that impressive. So, I mean, he showed out. He was decisive. You saw the zip on the ball. His only lone negative play, which still turned into some positive yardage, was probably the shovel pass to Javonte Williams, which wasn't even a bad play per se, as far as positive yards. But yeah, as far as if you were to nitpick it a little bit, that was his lone negative play.
Yeah.
So if you think about it too, he had 25 yards rushing, and he had a 16-yard rush brought back on a Cortland Sutton holding call. So he would have had 41 yards rushing in that first drive alone. Another thing too, people look at him and if you look at the stats and you're like 3 of 6, 24 yards passing, not so impressive, but he did have a drop pass that would have probably resulted in quite a bit of yardage by Javonte Williams right off the bat. And it was funny because Peyton actually mentioned it in the presser today. And he said that he told Javonte, after that drop, he goes, apparently you're not interested in an 80-yard screen pass, So it was I'm really encouraged by Russ. I love how pumped up he is. The team is rallying around him, and he looks phenomenal.
Yep. And Glenn, I'm glad you mentioned his stat line, because this is a perfect example, I feel like, of where the stats can be misleading, and you have to watch the game and watch what transpired, because obviously the one incompletion was the drop screen by Javonte. The second one was a throwaway that was just well covered downfield by the defense. And then the third one was on a deep over route to Jerry Jeudy into the end zone, where the broadcast angle showed there was like some illegal contact or a hold on that one that probably threw the timing off. Yes, you could again nitpick and say Russ maybe overshot it a touch, but I feel like he placed it where he thought Jeudy was going to be at that given time, and the illegal contact just threw everything off. And of course, ref ball, they missed it. So if you actually look at the tape, and I've got a film study on Denver Broncos syndicate from Russ's performance, there was only really one play, and maybe two if you're really nitpicky, that you could put as negative plays. And again, you have to be really damn nitpicky to make them negative plays.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I really like, and this goes back to, I guess you could say, Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, and also leading into Javonte Williams, is that when they've had the opportunity to throw to a player and they go right back to that particular player and give him that confidence. I love the fact that, one, for Javonte's sake, coming back from the injury, you saw the first play of the game, and it fit also well with what they were trying to do, because one, you were getting so many pressures from the week before, right? And so you kind of figure maybe San Francisco was going to be doing the same thing on the very first play. And so you run a screen, which probably they weren't expecting, but you give it to Javonte Williams, and it's the perfect play to get him some confidence. So you give it, you throw him the screen, and it was just a simple drop, but then you give it right back to him on a simple run play. Actually, no, on a comeback route, which was probably the play that was the biggest takeaway for me on Javonte and how well he's recovered, on that scramble drill, to basically just, run almost like a comeback route, if you will, but I guess it was like a scramble, a go route plus a scramble route. So, I mean, I thought all of it looked so encouraging, from Javonte, for the ability for them to once again give them that confidence back like they did Jerry Jeudy the week prior.
Yeah. And I think one of the other big things that needs to be talked about, Jaleel McLaughlin. I feel like Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be Sean Payton's Darren Sproles for the Broncos, right? Like
that's good comp.
That's what we're looking at, right?
He is something else, man. When the other broadcast is actually saying he's good, that's a good football player. Because I don't know if you guys had the chance to see that. So, like the 49ers broadcast on that touchdown where he sent two 49ers defenders to the other realm, and then he scored that touchdown. Like, at the very end of the 49ers broadcast goes, all right, he's good. So it's just that case. Like, I said before, one, he needs a new number. And maybe he can, have one of those numbers in the 20s. And two, he reminds me a little bit of a late Ronnie Hillman. I mean, like I like the way he carries the ball. I feel like he carries the ball just a little bit better. He's more tight around the chest and how he carries the football. But he really hits the hole. I mean, especially on like the 1st and 20 run and anything that you see, he is just so decisive on his runs. And I think that Sean Payton really embraces that.
He also exhibits patience on his runs, like the touchdown run where, honestly, Albert O, I want to talk about him for a second on that touchdown run. He had a block where he took the D lineman for a 7-yard magic carpet ride. It was incredible. I mean, he took him for a ride across the field, basically.
Literally.
And then, what I loved from Jaleel from that was that he literally just patiently waited for that blocking to develop and then hit it. And he was able to make that one defender look silly when he went into the end zone. That was a really beautiful rep from Jaleel. And that was just a showcase of just patience from him. And then a little hesitation move on his receiving touchdown to buy that extra little second to slip into the end zone. That was awesome as well. I've got another film study of Jaleel actually on my channel, Denver Broncos Syndicate. And he's just so fun to watch, man. He's been fun to watch every single day in camp. He has at least 2 of those big highlight reel plays. And last week in camp, they were giving him some looks with the first team offense. Some of it I feel like may have been scout team work to give him to try to simulate for the defense one of the 49ers speedy running backs. That's part of the reason for some of that work, I feel like. But they were also giving him looks with the first team offense that I was super excited to see that.
So, Gage, you know what's cool is that you were just talking about his patience, but what everyone else is talking about is his burst, and the fact that this guy is so aware and he can actually successfully do each of those types of runs is really impressive. And when you think of, like, if you've watched any interviews with him, he's the most upbeat guy. I mean, today I found out that he was homeless for a time. He would have games and then he'd go back and sleep in the car. Like, this guy is just so glad to be there. He's like, my teammates are doing everything they can for me, and so I'm going to do everything I can for them. You know, I just am so thrilled because he was a guy that before camp started, we were all excited to see based on his college highlight reel, and here we are. I mean, what a blessing that we were able to sign him as an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, very humble, for sure. And it kind of reminded me a little bit, to a certain extent, of Montreal Washington's first year when we had the opportunity to interview him. Just his approach, you know. I mean, you want to come in and you want to make sure that you impress the people that are on that staff, right? And I feel like Jaleel is embracing that exact same mentality of, you know, and that kind of humbleness will also endear you to fans. It will endear you to those fans, and it will help you, you know, really help make you a household name, right? And that was one of the things that made Philip Lindsay's name so known. I mean, especially not just the stuff on the field, but I mean, like, he was a pretty humble guy, right? And so I feel like, you know, with McLaughlin, he's going to be one of those players that you see as another fan favorite, or you already are seeing McLaughlin as already a fan favorite. So.
Well, two things with McLaughlin. One, they didn't put the G on his name this time.
That's right.
So congrats to the spell checker. And then two, not only did he have a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown, but he ripped off a massive return on special teams. So he's got that going for him too.
Well, and that's what we said, right, Gage, in like a couple episodes ago. Like, we said that if there's one thing that he probably would maybe have to separate himself and really make himself maybe a running back 3, you know, aside from the pass protection, it would be something like a big run on special teams, you know, something like that. There was a rather big play there on special teams against the 49ers.
And I want to shout Albert O out again. He had a pancake block, the key pancake block that freed up the lane for Jaleel to hit to return that. So shout out to Albert O. He's really impressed me in that last game with his blocking. It was a complete 180 from what we've seen from him previously.
Yeah. And then another bright spot, I thought, not quite as big as Russ and Jaleel, but there was an improved pass rush, especially from Zach Allen. We saw an interception from Elijah Garcia. So that was pretty fantastic. And I think then we go into like Frank Clark and Randy Gregory. They were in there, but they were in there till the 4th. I don't know if that really matters, but I did enjoy seeing the pass rush take a step forward from the Cardinals game.
You know who's really coming to his own, and we spent so much praise talking about Nick Bonito, but you know who's really coming into his own, and that's Jonathan Cooper. I mean, when a player like that is really coming into his own like that, and so much so that we are at least, I'm not saying they're going to cut Frank Clark, but at least like there's some conversations probably to be had as far as should the Broncos be starting Jonathan Cooper alongside Randy Gregory and not Frank Clark. That's a legitimate conversation. And it was a conversation, too, that said that today from Peyton that said that there is a competition happening at outside linebacker. And so, And so I think that Cooper is just – I have to give credit to I believe it was Joey or Frankie of Let's Talk Broncos, and I remember when they were on our show, and it was one of the best comparisons on the defensive side of the ball, and they said that Jonathan Cooper was like the Tim Patrick of the pass rushers. You know, I mean, like as far as like consistency, you know exactly what you're going to be getting from him week in and week out from the sheer consistency factor. And then, oh, by the way, I still have issues with the fact that he was a very late round draft pick. There was so much in terms of consistency there with his game and the way that he was doing pass rush moves and the array of pass rush moves and the strength and way that he can bull rush people. I think that like there is something there with Jonathan Cooper from a developmental side that one reminds me of Everson Griffith, and two, just as far as the ability for them to work with guys like Randy Gregory and Frank Clark. So it only helps benefit you in the long run. That's my Jonathan Cooper soapbox.
He was the one that put mayo in his coffee.
He was.
Yeah.
I used to be a Hellman's guy, but I'm a Duke's mayonnaise guy all the way. By the way, when you think of like with Cooper to be drafted in the 7th round, very late 7th round, and then having the cardiac issues before his rookie season was even starting, and to fast forward to where we are now, just couldn't be happier for the guy. Awesome dude. I still remember the video. Think about that when he was drafted and all the neighborhood kids came to his house to congratulate him. Like, that's how cool of a guy he is that the neighbors were sending the kids were going over to see him. I just super happy for him. I can't imagine, Frank Clark's going to get bounced from the team at this point,
right.
But there's going to be a ton of rotation. So each of these guys should see a lot of field time.
Well,
I want to say the local broadcast listed Coop as the starting edge rusher ahead of Frank Clark alongside Gregory. It was listed, I believe, as Gregory and Coop.
Well, and this has all been happening without arguably the best pass rusher, which is Baron Browning, who's injured. So imagine what we could do if we had the rotation with Baron Browning in there with Jonathan Cooper, Nick Benito, Randy Gregory.
Last week, Nick Benito was called by George Payton perhaps the best pass rusher on the team. Yeah,
and most improved player as well. I think that too. I'm not saying they should not go out and sign a defensive lineman, but also because of the pass rush and the defensive line play, you start to feel a lot more comfortable with the defensive line play with what you've been able to see, especially from the play of Elijah Garcia. I mean, like the guy has just been able to get into the backfield at a regularity that you need to in terms of making the roster. And oh, by the way, you're adding an interception to the mix, an impressive interception off of a deflection. So I mean, like, it's an athletic play. People may not actually look at that typical play like, oh, that's an athletic play, dude. That's a defensive lineman. That's almost like an offensive lineman, almost like catching a pass off of a deflection from a quarterback. Like that's an athletic play by a defensive lineman. So kudos to Garcia. And, I mean, so much publicity has been sent to McLaughlin for making the 53-man roster, but Garcia is making as much of a case to put his name on the 53-man roster.
I agree wholeheartedly. And something else we've seen in camp as well with Elijah Garcia, man, he's consistently been wreaking havoc in the backfield, making plays in the run game. He's been really good on stunts. That was how he got, I believe, both of his sacks in Arizona. So that's one way that Vance Joseph was able to use him quite effectively. So I'm really excited for Elijah Garcia. And given the Broncos' somewhat need for contributors on the D-line, he's probably a lock to make this active roster.
Yeah. Travis asked a question, wants to know what the likelihood that we beat Kansas City this year. Personally, I think we split last game at Arrowhead. Told me that we're not as far as we think. I'm in agreement. I think we split. But I think that we win at theirs and they win at ours.
Interesting.
That's a semi-hot take, actually.
I tried.
It is.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you look at the recent history or the history of several years now, Broncos have had good opportunities. These games, for the most part, have not been blowouts. But things like, Melvin Gordon doing his thing, and fumbling, which is ironic that then the Chiefs ended up signing him after they saw firsthand that the guy was Butterfingers McGee. But I agree, Travis. Unlike Mike, I think it's going to be, the home team wins. Yeah. But I would be absolutely shocked if we lost both this year.
I think about that last game where we played Kansas City, that bullshit offensive pass interference call on Cortland Sutton.
Yep.
That was garbage. He made an incredible catch on that play. And just because he brushed up against the DB, they called it OPI. He brushed up against him. He didn't push off. It was just incredible athletic play.
And the thing with that drive, Broncos were up 14-3. So like on that particular drive, the Broncos had the ability to go up by 3 scores, like and a significant amounts. Like that was a big deal, for the Broncos, in terms of that phantom, OPI call.
And the late hit on Russ, it wasn't called, and he got absolutely tattooed after the fact.
Yeah, from Chris Jones. I mean, it was but that's okay. Roger
Who
Goodell
then laughed about it after the fact, knowing that, like he didn't make any bones about that. He knew that it was a late hit and he got away with it.
Or that, after they won the Super Bowl, Roger Goodell's actually, recorded saying, I don't mind how you hit the quarterback. I mean,
that team has no respect for the rest of the NFL. None.
No.
But you know what? That's what happens when you're a winning team. And that's what happens when you're a losing team, is that you don't get these. You're never going to get the calls if you're playing crappy. It's just Murphy's Law.
Yep. And Sports Nonsense says Garcia, Henningsen, and Harris have looked good. I also want to throw in Isang Bassi. He's been playing very well on the back end.
Versatile. Something I didn't see in his arsenal, and something we actually are starting to see this year, and maybe that's something that they've been dabbling with maybe Fangio or even in the Evero scheme. But I mean, he's playing safety this year, and given the ability to use him in those multiple different ways, and for him to come away with 2 interceptions in 2 straight weeks, that's showing out. And props to him. I mean, he's a player that is been criticized, certainly, and a player that's always been on the bubble, should we say, for those 4 years. And so kudos to him for playing as well as he has.
Yeah.
100%.
And one other thing that we forgot to cover on the offensive side of the ball, Javonte Williams was back. His first game suiting up for the Broncos since the injury. How did you think he guys played?
I feel like we talked about him. I don't know. Maybe I missed a 10-minute stretch of the show.
No, we didn't. I don't listen to you guys. So we're doing it again.
Mike has a tendency to forget things, Glenn. It's okay.
He's zoned out. Fine, we won't talk about it then. Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Well, how about Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci?
Yes, that is
was
a topic
there
of
even
conversation.
really that big of? So so seeing how Stidham played, I understand why they brought him in, because he has this sort of playing style like Russ does. He can get on the outside, he can throw the ball on the move, but I don't think that DiNucci and Stidham had that big of a gap, even in the Niners game, of how they played.
I don't know. DiNucci looked like crap to me.
Yeah, he kind of did. I agree.
DiNucci
the fact that he couldn't even convert that 4th down was a little troublesome too.
But I mean, Stidham didn't help matters. Here's a case to go to Gage talking about Russ. Like at the beginning, it's like you look at the statistic and it's like, oh, he had a great preseason, but I mean, like you go through it, he was more up and down, like in some positive ways than DiNucci, and played better than him. But I mean, like if you were to say like who separated, I would probably say Stidham separated just a little bit, but not enough for it to certainly like close the deal, by any stretch of the imagination. But I mean, it's also one of the reasons why, going back to last week to circle back on that conversation, it's one of the reasons why we shouldn't be too hasty on some of the stuff saying, oh, DiNucci should be quarterback too. He played, but also giving credit where credit's due. He played great, but he needs to be able to bounce, or stack days. That's the famous term for this Broncos preseason, is they need to be able to stack days and stack preseasons together, and DiNucci did not do that. I mean, he was by far, actually, he might have been the worst Denver Broncos player on the field of anybody in that preseason.
I would actually agree with that, and that's coming from someone who's a
Really?
big DiNucci fan like me. Yeah, I didn't think he played well. He made some poor decisions out there, just didn't look like he was seeing the field well, but that was the first time that I will really say that there was a gap between DiNucci and Stidham. Like it wasn't so much due to Stidham playing out of his mind, it was because DiNucci played like crap. So, I mean, that's the first time where I feel like there was a real big disparity in all my days that I've watched camp and the 2 preseason games. So I'm curious to see if that trend continues, because Sean said that the starters, if they even play at all against Los Angeles in the preseason, they're only going one drive. So that means we're going to see a lot of Jarrett Stidham. We're going to see a lot of Ben DiNucci in this one. I'm thinking maybe a full half for each pretty much. So I'm thinking we're going to get a good chance to get a look at this and see what transpires between those two. What?
Listen, I've got a lot of stuff going on, okay? Leave me alone.
Well, and did
You know what,
have any-
guys? I think we should talk about the 49ers game and see how things went.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that yet. Let's talk about the 49ers game.
How about that Randy Gradishar? He's up for the Hall of Fame. I don't know if you guys heard about that.
Did we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that too.
Well, the thing I like, well, and the thing was,
I'm going home.
the thing with the Stidham too that makes it so frustrating that we should reinforce here. Russ played so well, but also to that point, in order to best evaluate this backup quarterback battle, Stidham played with the ones, and he looked like crap. If you're evaluating that kind of quarterback battle, you want to make sure, if you want to best spread out and basically, pull away from your competition, wouldn't you want to play well with, the elite competition that's on your roster? You would think so. And Stidham didn't exactly, pull forward by any means.
So Travis asked the questions about tight ends, saying that we've had trouble covering them since Super Bowl 50. And the first thing that popped into my head is, I wonder if that's what Isang Bassi could be used for. Because with the defense going to more of a man coverage, we have the personnel that we could put Bassi on a tight end instead of having a linebacker drop.
And that's what happens when we play a lot more nickel defenses. You're going to see DBs covering tight ends a lot more than you're going to see linebackers covering tight ends.
But I'm thinking more of a JL Skinner type than an Isang Bassi covering. But, Travis, unfortunately, and this is a great comment. Unfortunately, we're in a division with Travis Kelce, and literally no team has figured out how to cover that guy. The George Kittles of the world. And hopefully Greg Dulcich eventually is in that category where teams can't figure out where to cover. But I think it's less the linebackers and more the DBs that are going to be responsible for those guys these days.
I think being able to have Pat Surtain, Jamari Mathis, you got K'Wan Williams, then you've got JL Skinner, you've got Isang Bassi, you've got Caden Stearns in the back now. You still have Jack, you still got Justin Simmons. Like, being able to have that rotation in the backfield, I think allows the DBs to cover a tight end.
But thank you for mentioning that, Mike, because that's exactly what I was going to say, is like the versatility is actually something that the Broncos have not had before. And especially, and I know we said that linebackers can't exactly, cover tight ends, but let's throw Drew Sanders into that mix. I mean, Drew Sanders, is possibly one of those wrenches that could possibly be one of those players. So JL Skinner, Drew Sanders, Caden Stearns, and Pat Surtain. I mean,
who's the other rookie? Riley
Moss. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I mean, and the one thing I was going to say is that, it reminded me a little bit about when Aqib Talib went one-on-one with Rob Gronkowski. We shouldn't, rule out the idea of Pat Surtain being on a guy like a Travis Kelce, mirroring him one-on-one. And especially now, and obviously Andy Reid is like the ultimate schemer as far as, in particular Travis Kelce and getting him open. But I mean, I wouldn't put it past the Broncos to put Surtain on Travis Kelce the entire game, especially now with possibly Vance Joseph here. So I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility.
not to take any credit away from Andy Reid, but like I think we learned a little bit in that quarterback series how much improvisation there is, not only from Mahomes but also from Kelsey in that offense. But Cam, I appreciate you mentioning Drew Sanders. I totally overlooked that. And I mean, this is a guy that's tackling his own teammates. And Josie Jewell said today that he's been fined twice, and they need to collect from him because he wasn't supposed to be tackling his own guys. But that might be the play.
Mm-hmm.
One, and I think we've had this conversation before, but with Vance Joseph as the defensive coordinator, is Pat Surtain just going to take a side, or are they going to put him on a player?
I feel like they'll put him on players because Vance is going to play quite a bit of man coverage, and in those scenarios, you're going to want PS2 to take away the top.
Yeah, he's on the one,
threat,
right?
So, yeah, pretty much. So, and in Kansas City's case,
wouldn't that be
Kadarius Toney would be. Yeah, because Kadarius Toney's their number one receiver, and I feel like Damari Mathis would be the guy that I'd actually want covering Kadarius Toney, honestly.
Right.
So, because of his speed. So, I definitely am totally good with us putting PS2 on Kelsey pretty much the entire game because I feel like Damari can take away Kadarius Toney, and that's really the biggest threat on the outside that KC has. I said when Kansas City lost Tyreek Hill that wasn't going to be the big issue for them. If Travis Kelce goes down, they are fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and obviously there's a wide receiver that is worth mentioning with Kansas City that bears watching, and that's Justin Ross. Justin Ross is a wide receiver that certainly bears watching. Big wide receiver from Clemson. He's finally healthy. He was an undrafted free agent. Honestly, it was almost sort of like like T. Higgins in that same department, not injured, but just like as far as a wide receiver from Clemson. And so his catch radius is insane. And with Pat Mahomes, that's all he needs.
So talking about Kansas City, and obviously we don't know for sure, but when we're playing Kansas City, are we going to have a spy on Mahomes like Jewell or Singleton that would just follow him around?
Well, so that's the twist, I think, with Drew Sanders, right? Because Drew Sanders is like we mentioned it about him possibly even being a guy on Travis Kelce. You could also even use Drew Sanders as just a sole QB spy, on Patrick Mahomes. Because I mean, you guys can call up any highlights of what he was able to do with Bryce Young at Alabama. I mean, he was able to run sideline to sideline with Bryce Young, who is a twig. I mean, he's Russell's height, but he's a twig, and he can move rather fast. So, I mean, with Pat Mahomes, you're talking about a quarterback that can really do anything. And so having a quarterback that can possibly spy him would be beneficial. Now, that's a tall order, putting a rookie on that kind of task, certainly. So maybe, you would want maybe a veteran in that kind of case, but I wouldn't rule out Sanders.
With Nick Benito coming into his own, what do you think about him filling that role?
But you wouldn't want to have it on an edge, would you?
Well,
because you'd want the edges to crash in. You'd want the side to spy.
I'm not ruling it out because, if you go back and you watch his tape at Oklahoma, when you watch the tape specifically of Oklahoma versus Nebraska and Adrian Martinez, I mean, he was spying Adrian Martinez that entire game.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that's certainly an option, but I mean, I wouldn't want to say take him from his best attribute and have him rush the passer. But I wouldn't rule out that possibility.
Oh, and one of the other things that we saw was DJ Jones. DJ Jones got in there and played some pretty good snaps. I think that we finally saw what we thought we were getting last year in him stuffing the run. I think he was able to – he didn't have a lot of tackles, but he was in there making the running back change direction, which is what we wanted last year anyway.
I was kind of surprised he played after being in concussion protocol from the week before, but it was a pleasant surprise, and I'm glad he did well.
Not even a question.
Mm-mm. No, it's Ben DiNucci. We all know it's Ben DiNucci.
I will say yes. However, I will say that don't be surprised if the Broncos' future quarterback is on the roster in 2024.
No, 2024, we're running it back with Hackett as head coach and Rodgers actually moving to Denver. We're going to do it. We're going to do it that way.
And Skangs is the offensive coordinator.
Skangs is the
Tight end
offensive coordinator.
sweeps, baby. Tight end sweeps. Give it to
Pat
Greg.
Shermer, Pat Shermer as a consultant.
Oh, did you see? Speaking of Pat Shermer, he's a consultant for the CU Buffs.
Yeah.
And I just saw the other day that one of the things that he mentioned was that he, watches the practices, watches the tapes, but he's not permitted to actually speak to any of the players personally.
What?
No. He actually divulged that, which is hysterical. I don't know if it's a college rule or if it's a Dion rule, but
to Dion's credit, he must have done a lot of homework, because if you go look at his staff at CU, and this is the only praise I will ever give to CU on air. I'm kidding, but this is the only praise I'll give.
Well, we've heard about Nebraska twice already, so keep going.
I don't even know if Nebraska wins, but that's my 2 cents. But I think that Dion, to his credit, has built a pretty impressive staff there at CU. So you could honestly let Shermer go, and it really wouldn't make much of a difference.
I mean,
yeah, Gage, check it out.
Yeah, seriously, I will, man. Shermer, the connection there, because Dion's heavily tied in with Mike Zimmer, and Shermer was Zim's offensive coordinator in 2017 when the Vikings had that big breakout season with Case Keenum, man, where he was basically just throwing up 50. Yep. Just throw up those 50-50 balls to Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, and then Marcus Williams misses a tackle on that play in Minneapolis for the Minneapolis Miracle. Yeah. I still remember that. I was really pulling for the Vikings that year. I had some family in Minnesota, so I was really pulling for the Vikings that year, and I remember losing my mind when Marcus Williams missed that tackle and Stephon Diggs broke out and went into the end zone. That was so much fun to watch live.
I also remember getting sucked into the Case Keenum hype because of the Minnesota Miracle.
No kidding.
So our daughter is packing for college, by the way. Like, she's a freshman. And I was standing in front of her closet, and there was a jersey in there, and it was a Case Keenum Broncos jersey that I got her because I was so convinced he was going to be gret. And the funny thing is exactly, it still has the tags on it. so she was not a believer either.
Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to talk about was Brett Maher. He did have a great day kicking, but there has been rumors circulating that the Broncos might try to make a trade with the Saints for Will Lutz. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and you touched on that, Gage, with your Broncos syndicate.
Mm-hmm. I actually, we touched on this on the pod. I want to say it was last week.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Right now, the Saints are in a kicking competition with Will Lutz and undrafted rookie out of Notre Dame, Blake Group. And Groups hasn't attempted a kick more than like 30 yards in the preseason. He did have a game winner against Kansas City, but apparently he's been booming balls in camp, like booming balls according to Saints media. So with Group, if the Saints want to potentially keep Will Lutz and place Group on waivers, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Sean Payton pounces. Or conversely, if they want to go with the younger guy in Group, then Sean Payton and Mike Westhoff have that heavy connection there.
Yeah.
With Will Lutz. They might be willing to give up a day 3 pick for him. He's only under contract for this season. He's set to be a UFA next year. But if they could bring him in and maybe entice him with like a 1-year contract extension to be our kicker for the next 2 years, I feel like that could be a big option for them because, again, Mike Westhoff seems to be wanting his guys in the building. Same with Ben Kotwicka. And I feel like Will Lutz just would make too much sense. But I feel like the more realistic option would be maybe them taking a flyer on Blake Group if he becomes available. Mm-hmm. But either way, man, I think those are two intriguing options.
And Blake, just all he says is "I am Group." But anyway, I'm not in favor of giving up picks. I feel like we're finally whole again, and we have success with these later round choices. That to give up a pick for a kicker, the only way we do it is if like Gage says, you get an extra year perhaps out of it. But you probably could entice them anyway, just with the guy that gets cut. But think about Maher. He had his best performance of the season so far, and now he's still in the hot seat. There's like no rest for the weary.
Yeah, Payne did say today that he feels pretty confident about the kicking. He did say that, but and I will say, and it's something that I've used this comparison before, but kicking is one of the things that compares rather favorably to like a closer in baseball. You have to have the memory of a goldfish. And I think that for Maher, you never want someone to lose their job. And unfortunately, due to injury, the Broncos officially waived Elliott Fry today with an injury designation. But I think that you never want a player to lose their job. But I feel like Fry also being waived possibly gave Maher that enough confidence going into that preseason game, saying, "Oh, maybe they actually do believe in me. Let's go out and do something." And so I think that can give you a lot of confidence going into that next game.
And we would be remiss, not mentioning the other kicker on the roster, Riley Dixon. 4 kicks, and he averaged more than 60 yards per punt. That is insane. I mean, and that was in San Francisco. So it's going to be very cool, when he's taking a snap at the Broncos goal line, to see what kind of boomer he can have in Denver.
Well, that's one of those things
what,
that I texted.
What a guy to bring back.
That coverage was horrible, but good Lord, that was a big kick.
Yeah. What I was gonna say, if we talk so much about reunions, we don't talk about Riley Dixon, because if you think back to his time in Denver, it was kind of shaky at times, and so it's kind of shaky. So to see him come back and possibly do what he was able to do in that preseason gives you a lot of hope. And one of the things that there was the biggest hope, when they drafted him, I'm sure, was they give you 4th down flexibility if you want to go for it. Because you go look at his famous Syracuse highlights, the guy was trucking people and throwing passes and trying to impersonate Johnny Hecker out there. I mean, he was a pretty dynamic punter.
And they did do that with him in his first stint here, if I remember correctly. And that they drafted him also because he's got a big leg. He's always had a big leg. It's just consistency. I mean, there'll be times where it feels like, I don't know if the punt just goes off of his foot bad or what. I'm not an aficionado with punting, but it just felt like there are times where it'd be like a bad drop or something like that, and the ball would just go off the side of his foot. So with Riley, man, the raw talent's there. It's just all about consistency with him.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to cover before we get going, I want us to pick a breakout player and a player that's either in the doghouse or you don't think is going to make the 53. And I'm going to start it out because I'm not going to make it easy. I'm going to take all the easy picks, and you guys can think about it. So I'm going Jaleel McLaughlin, obviously. He's going to be the one. I mean, he honestly could make an argument for RB2 at this point. But obviously, I think he's running back 3. And I think the person in the doghouse or is not going to make the roster, Hall of Famer Kendall Hinton. I don't think he's going to make this roster.
Can I go first?
Whoever.
So, I think so for breakout, I've got Jaquan McMillan. I mean, this dude has been really good as a boundary corner. He's probably going to see a role if in the event that somebody like Pat Surtain or Damari Mathis go down, but even as like an extra DB in nickel and dime situations, Jaquan has shown that versatility. He can play the boundary. He can play inside. So he's somebody that I have as a breakout. And although I've sung him pretty high praise, just because I feel like it's a numbers game right now, and I just don't think Alberto is going to make this team. I feel like they're going to carry 4 tight ends. Nate Atkins will be that 4th tight end. The dude is like an extra fullback out there, basically. He's the backup to Michael Burton. I'm going to say he's like a better version of Andrew Beck almost. That's kind of how I feel about Nate Atkins. He'll be like the direct back up to Michael Burton, but he'll get looks at tight end as well. So just because of the pure numbers game, I don't see Alberto Cuevanon making this team.
So I'm going to cut in before Cam lists like 4 people, and then I'm left with nobody. My breakout is going to be Brandon Johnson. Thrilled that he was back at practice along with Justin and McGlinchey and Manhertz. He's going to play a major role with the injuries in the wide receiver room. And I'm going to piggyback on Mike. I don't know if this is allowed, but the Kendall Hinton is 100% accurate. He has struggled, and I've referenced it in the practice that I saw in person. He dropped 2 punts. Then he got a penalty the other night. I think he dropped a couple passes, or maybe got 2 penalties the other night. Like, he's just not showing his value at a time where, of all the position groups, that is the one you have the real opportunity to stand out and show that you should make this team. So I don't think Kendall Hinton makes this fun.
You're muted, Mike.
Doesn't make any sense. Why am I muted? I don't know. The fact that they brought in a wide receiver when Virgil went down, instead of like rolling with what they have, says everything I need to know.
Yeah. It's just I think there's a fair argument that Kendall Hinton, Hall of Fame, quarterback Kendall Hinton, is actually one of the grave disappointments of this preseason. I think it's pretty fair to say that. So I was kind of going back on both, and actually I thought that maybe you guys would go with both in as far as some choices. But one is on the offensive side of the ball, one is on the defensive side of the ball as far as breakout players. And we already talked about him earlier, but Drew Sanders, I think, is a prime candidate to be a breakout player. You already heard Sean Payton talk about it today, how you saw the significant increase as far as what he's been able to see from preseason 1 to preseason 2, his versatility, the way that we talked about it earlier, almost to the same vein of Baron Browning, the way that he was used as a pass rusher, the way he was used possibly as an inside linebacker. He offers you a lot of versatility. The offensive side of the ball, as far as the breakout, I'm surprised you guys didn't say that, was Marvin Mims. I think Marvin Mims is poised to surprise a lot of people. I think that, we say so often with Russ being a little unfamiliar with, say, the middle of the field. Marvin Mims, I think, is going to be a key cog as far as Russ having success in the middle of the field. We saw that in the 49ers preseason game. And also we mentioned about the Tyler Lockett comparison. So Mims, as far as a player who I think is going to make the roster, you can never have too many cornerbacks. And I think that the play that was made in special teams, Fabian Moreau, I think that Fabian Moreau will be one of those players that sneaks on to the roster. So I will say Fabian Moreau.
Who do you think does not make it?
Who does not make it? I will say
same position group, right, Cam? Like Tremon Smith, maybe?
Yeah, I would say Tremon Smith. I mean, the door opens for number 23. I mean, for Jaleel McLaughlin to take number 23, which, by the way, that puts me in a lot of feels. I mentioned about Ronnie Hillman earlier, but if McLaughlin wore 23, that would be the number that Ronnie Hillman wore. But Tremon Smith, talk about a disappointment, though. He was brought in as possibly a kickoff return, punt return specialist. They actually play him solely at corner to see what he's got, and they don't even get a lick of what he's looking like on special teams, and he's been a massive disappointment, except for, say, the one play where it was like he was just mauled in the end zone, where it was a true offensive pass interference. But, I mean, hey, that's not just the only takeaway. He's been absolutely garbage in this preseason.
Yeah, and in camp, too. He's been awful.
So
I got to say, though, you keep mentioning the number, and I would love to see Jaleel get a different number, but I also want to have him have his own identity. He has no connection with Hillman aside from just being similar body types. So
single digit.
I wish there were I wish there was a single digit left. I mean, the only one I think that is remaining, and correct me if I'm wrong. Well, if Hinton gets cut, number 9 is, but also number 1.
Yeah, 1.
And if you're thinking about bringing back KJ Hamler, do Do you screw him by taking his number in the interim? I don't know. But him with a number 1 on his jersey would be pretty slick.
Oh, what number did KJ wear at Penn State?
1.
Well, he was 13.
Oh, he did?
He was 13 when he first came into the Broncos, and then he swapped to 1.
With Ojemudia, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
13's Taylor Grimes' number, who's probably a prime candidate for the practice squad. They didn't give him a lot of looks in San Francisco. That tells me they're trying to sneak him onto the practice squad.
I say they give him 0-0, Glenn. Just give McLaughlin 0-0.
That'd be sick.
So Gage, I got that. That kind of brings up a question for
One
me.
half.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of are going away from questioning who's at wide receiver. I think we have a pretty good idea of who's going to be wide receiver on the team. But how many running backs is the team going to carry, and who's not going to make it? Because they're not going to carry 4 running backs, are they?
They might.
They might have to. I think they have to at this point. I mean, right now, I think the conversation really is who's going to be RB4. Is it going to be Tyler Beatty? Is it going to be Tony Jones
Or Dwayne Washington?
Or Dwayne
Beatty
Washington.
was back today, by the way.
Yes, he was. He was. So I think Jalil's locked his spot down. But we need to figure out who's going to be the 4th guy, because I think they're going to keep 4. There's so much talent in that backfield.
If they don't keep Jalil, there will be riots in the streets.
Oh,
like,
there's no chance.
I swear.
There you go.
And I think if Beatty gets exposed to the waiver wire, that he's long gone.
Yeah.
Tony Jones, I'm not convinced.
I mean, he had a big
okay.
play in San Francisco.
Right.
And so, I mean, like I wasn't the highest on Tony Jones last week in Arizona, but he kind of bounced back, I feel like, in that San Francisco game. So, oh man, it's a tough numbers game. I feel like that injury to Tyler Beatty, I feel like really hurt him. It did.
Mm-hmm.
I think
you almost think that like Jones is the same type of body size running style that you have with Williams and P. Ryan. Do you want another one?
I don't know, but I think that's why, like, if you keep 4, it should be a guy like a Dwayne Washington who offers that special teams versatility. Now, I think the reason why, so like, let's just say for the sake of argument that, they keep 3, but they have 4 tight ends, and Nate Atkins is one of those that are being kept. Gage mentioned it earlier, possibly with his fullback and tight end versatility. So, I mean, like there's the versatility there, and maybe that allows you to keep an extra wide receiver, a guy by the name of Little Jordan Humphrey, right? A guy that's a wide receiver / tight end that gives you that extra blocking as well. So it's just, it kind of gives you some versatility of that. But I think if you keep a 4th running back, it would have to be a guy like a Washington, who we know is definitely familiar with Sean Payton.
Yep. That's
okay.
Great argument. Love it.
Okay. Any other topics you guys want to cover? Anything you want to close with? Anything you want to say?
So, how about Randy Gradishar?
We need a new co-host now.
We need a new co-host every week.
No, hopefully we've got some. Well, normally it's just Cam. Hopefully we've got some news on Randy Gradishar tomorrow. So let's shut it down. We'll end it. Right. I'm not even gonna say anything. We'll just close it down. No, make sure you join us on the PSF app tomorrow as we have the first episode of Elevation Orange at 7 Central. So that's 6 Mountain. We do appreciate everyone that joined us in the chat. Great conversations, great questions. It's always a great time. Make sure you check out all the other shows on the network. We have shows Monday through Friday, Broncos shows, Avalanche shows, football in general shows, sports in general. We got a college show getting ready to start, all kinds of stuff. So make sure you go check those out. Like, subscribe, share, turn on notifications.
Subscribe to Denver Broncos Syndicate.
Yeah, subscribe to Denver Broncos Syndicate right down there on Gage's little thing, Denver Broncos Syndicate on YouTube. And then mainly Broncos, obviously, with Cam. Make sure you check that out as well.
Yeah, we have a guest tomorrow. He was supposed to be there last week, but Frankie's film at Frankie Abbott of Let's Talk Broncos is going to be there tomorrow, and we may have a surprise guest for people, one that is quite known for adjusting people. So stay tuned to that.
I'm not sure how to take that. I'm pretty sure I know what that means, but I'm not sure how to take that. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country. We love Denver. We love Colorado. We'll see you guys later. And peace.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.